Welcome to the Made Leader Podcast, where exceptional leadership isn't about who you are, but who you choose to become. Join your host, Jen Arnold, for expert interviews, real-world stories, and practical advice that transforms managers into exceptional leaders. If you're a middle manager ready to unlock your potential, this is your podcast. Let's get started.
Hey there, and welcome to the Made Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Jen Arnold. In today's workplace, we have a large mix of generations, 5 in fact. We've got AI transforming how we work, or at least saying it's going to transform how we work, and we're all trying to collaborate effectively. It's a lot for any of us to navigate, especially when each generation brings different skills and learning needs to the table. So how do smart organizations help their people adapt to all these changes? And what role do you as a middle manager play in making it happen? Today, I'm joined by Michelle Westfort, Chief Strategy and Solutions Officer at InStride. Michelle's a globally recognized leader in post-secondary education with over 20 years of experience. Michelle's been with InStride since its inception in 2019, and her career has centered around unlocking access to education from high school launch programs to adult career pathways, and from digital transformations to workforce skilling. In today's conversation, we dive into what successful companies are doing to create a culture of continuous learning, why older workers aren't as resistant to new skills as you may think, or maybe as stereotypes suggest, and the simple questions you can ask tomorrow to start developing your team more effectively. Let's go ahead and dive into my conversation with Michelle Westfort. Michelle, welcome to the Made Leader Podcast. I'm so glad to have you on today.
Thank you so much, Jen. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I like to start with this fill in the blank kind of question or statement that I'd love you to complete for us. If you really knew me, you would know that.
If you really knew me, you'd know that I am obsessed with connecting the dots. And so whether that's solving complex business problems or finding a mom hack for traveling with teenagers or finding something on super sale. And also, I believe education is the ultimate superpower. So I'm on a mission to help companies unlock it. And so whether it's business as a benefit or game-changing strategy, fun fact, I traveled to over 50 countries. So I guess you could say that I'm equally as passionate about lifelong learning and maybe navigating airports.
Oh, wow. With your teenagers? Did they come with you or did you do these solo?
Yeah, no, we traveled together.
Lovely. Do you have a favorite place?
We actually like going to different places all the time. And so our last trip was to Colombia, and prior year we were in Peru. We did go see the Grand Canyon this year. So certainly we do love to travel, for sure.
That sounds wonderful. Man, I won't keep asking about travel. I'd love to travel. And then I've got an 11-year-old, so almost a teenager. So I'll be coming back to ask you about some of those teenage mom hacks at some point.
Ziploc bags. Put a Ziploc bag. Any kid stuff goes in there. You can squeeze out the air and actually works perfectly. So really.
Okay. Wonderful. Invest in Ziploc bags. Thank you. All right, Michelle. So let's just, we've got a wild workforce right now. We've got 5 generations working together. We've got AI always being talked about. We've got, this kind of boomer generation, maybe rethinking retirement. So what are you seeing successful companies do to help their people adapt to all of these things happening in the workforce?
The smartest organizations today are really doubling down on continuous learning. And so they're not just offering programs, but they're actually weaving in education to the fabric of their culture. So whether it's reskilling employees with AI, as you mentioned, or whether it's empowering older workers to stay competitive in the workforce, successful companies are thinking about how growth actually starts by investing in their people. And so when we think about, like I'm watching LinkedIn right now with the folks posting about Davos, and I see them walking and talking, and the World Economic Forum is happening right now, and so there they are. Of course, secret dream of mine to go there, but they're posting their thoughts. And one that I heard this morning from the COO of LinkedIn, he was talking about the skills of tomorrow and sort of companies in the next 10 and 20 and 30 years from now, like what will that look like, and how does that transform? And one of the things he talked about was that if you look at the shift that has happened over the last 10 years from liberal arts education to STEM, like how is that different in terms of the skills with AI? And do we need more technical education, or do we need more human-centric education? And as we think about AI being a part of every job in the future, sort of that combination of technical and human is one of the things that he was reporting that some of the, best thinkers were talking about in terms of the future of work. So it's definitely interesting as people enter the workforce. My 17-year-old is looking for his first job. Certainly the skills that he has are quite different than, those that are nearing retirement, as you mentioned. But sort of this notion of hybrid skills, kind of part tech and part human, is, I think, what's hitting the generations proportionately differently. So, how many of the younger folks are going to need more of the human skills? How many of them more reaching retirement age are going to need more of the technical skills? And organizations thinking about how they adapt to that entire phenomenon through really investing in every end of the workforce.
Yeah, there is. It's interesting because you need both, right? You need to stay up on tech, and you need those human skills, which seem to be, I don't care what generation you're in, they seem to be lacking, especially with the different generations getting into the workforce. So when you say, weaving in education to the fabric of the culture, does that mean having formal training opportunities, having, kind of casual learning opportunities, giving them, tuition reimbursement? What are you thinking about as far as that upskilling or reskilling?
Yeah, I mean, it could mean all of those things. And if you think about from a cultural standpoint, what's sort of, expected of people from a development standpoint? Of course, you can create a program that's a benefit. You can create that. You can also create ways in which people are taken through learning, through cohorts and so forth. But being able to instill curiosity and also making sure that people are aware of programs that exist, it's kind of all inclusive when you think about an organization that has people that are wanting to better themselves, because that's kind of an accepted part of my work environment. That's what I mean by culture.
Now, I like that you said that, because what is expected of people, like if they are expected to learn and grow, then they're going to be like, oh yeah, I better get on it, right? What tools are available to me? But if it's not, then there's no incentive unless they're naturally curious or they have this desire to stay in the know.
Well, there is this sense of people keeping up with the next person as well. So, as you see somebody else reading a book or, taking a class, like there is an element of wanting to keep up with your peers and your colleagues.
Yes. And always, it just comes up now that I'm in my 40s. Like I have to ask questions that feel stupid. Like I just don't know, right? I remember when Claude first came out, someone was like, why don't you run that through Claude? And I was like, who the hell's Claude? Like I felt like such an old person, right? And now Claude is my bestie.
Now you can't go a day without using it.
Right. And so I think it's also safe, providing those safe spaces where older people like myself can ask these questions, because you just don't know. Right. And like you have to ask, or you have to be around people and then go do your research to figure out what it is. But when companies, or like when you think about it from the holistic, the bigger picture perspective, organizations making development a priority. But then also the managers have to also role model that. And why should they? What is the business impact if managers are going to say, yes, we are excited about your growth and development. Here's what you can go do. Why should they?
Well, look, I'm not going to be the one to make it up, but you've heard it a million times. People don't leave companies, they leave their managers. And so from a very a fundamental perspective, retention actually is a business metric that matters to organizations. But ultimately, if you think about managers and employee success, the managers are the linchpins to that. And when they prioritize development, there truly is a ripple effect. People feel valued, the retention, of course, but teams actually perform better. And the opposite happens when development is neglected. The disengagement begins, turnover happens. And then when you have turnover, you have loss of institutional knowledge. So as corporations get smarter at really measuring how this works, they quickly see that when managers develop their people, there is impact. Now, people don't always have the time to develop their people with every sort of skill. And that's where it's been really exciting to, bring some solutions to InStride, through InStride. So corporations can actually lean on an organization to help solve and build some of these programs strategically. So that's been really fun work. But we definitely start with the manager, inspiring that sense of curiosity, and uncovering new ways to do business. So there's real hard dollars to be lost or made when people are growing and developing themselves.
Yeah, and I think also the growth and development, when you develop your team, it's a lever that you can pull that doesn't cost a lot, right? Like it's not like you can't give people promotions all the time. You can't give them like big raises, but you can, cross train them or develop them in different ways. And anyways, you talk about the 5 generations in the workplace. How often do you feel like workers will say 40 plus or maybe overlooked or 50 plus, 60, whatever, the more experienced workers, how often do they get the bad rap that they're not interested in learning new skills? Like, is that perception, reality? What is that?
I just think it's not true. And I've seen data that says that, more than half of employees that are, 60 to 69, for instance, like they're using tuition reimbursement to stay competitive. Like that's one of the reasons that they still are doing it. But there is utilization from the 50 plus market that we're seeing. And so I certainly don't believe that they're not interested. The utilization definitely speaks otherwise. And I think that older workers recognize that lifelong learning is not just a nice to have. They do need it to continue to grow. And so I think older workers are motivated. They don't always take the same things that younger folks take, but certainly it's about they're, interested in learning new skills. And as we think about the workforce continuing to evolve, maintaining that sense of relevancy is simply important. And we see them meaningfully adopting education programs and participating.
Okay, so just a clarification point. So when you talk about utilization, you're talking about when you go into companies and you have the InStride data and you're looking at that from demographics and you say, no, 50 plus workers are actually using this just as much or as much?
Well, I wouldn't say just as much, but there's definitely utilization from the 50 plus market. And so to me, that indicates that there is interest there, and that it's not a stale demographic. It's certainly one that is interested in continuing to better themselves and keep learning.
Yeah. And when you think about it, if you're 50, you could have 20 more years in the workforce. Like there's this, it's not like, they need to be ignored in any way. But you did say that they take maybe different things. When you look at utilization between, let's just say 50 plus,
Yeah.
and you skew that, feel free to cut the data any way you want on the lower end, but you said that they're taking different types of
Yeah.
courses, maybe.
You see, the interest in technical courses. You see the interest in that, getting a little bit sharper on the technical side. Because, certainly when you get to a certain age, you have a level of confidence, you have a sense of communication, even if it was from trying different ways, not necessarily developing through textbook knowledge, but just through life. And so some of those technical skills are harder to just gain through life. And so those are the things that we're seeing older workers, really gravitate towards. Project management courses and ways in which they think that there's opportunity. Cybersecurity has been a popular one among the technical skill training as well.
Yeah. Well, and I'm assuming some AI courses.
And AI courses as well. Prompt engineering is one that's really, really popular. And of course, we're all using it. But to sharpen the skills are definitely, things that are exciting for folks as well.
Yeah. You can't really have a conversation without AI anymore. It feels like, at least.
Yeah.
So thinking about older workers, what are some barriers or challenges that they may face when it comes to development? If they're in an organization and, they're just going about their day, what maybe should they be looking out for that could come up as a barrier for them?
Yeah. So I don't think that it's about the willingness to learn. But if you think about the perception or the accessibility to some of these things, that really may be more of the barrier. So if I think about these outdated stereotypes that older folks are resistant to change or older folks are resistant to technology, it's the perception. And then this mindset to continuing to grow feels like a more positive one. People think that education will not necessarily lead them to more opportunities at an older age, but the reality is that it continues to. And so they do have that want and interest, and can it work? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. We do see that older workers tend to be more hesitant to ask for training and development. And I think that may be because they fear being judged or being behind the times. I mean, even in our own organization, the people that will admit to not knowing, are the ones that are less experienced that we see. And so it's kind of a different time than it was maybe when we started the workforce, Jen. Today, we're seeing a bit of that mindset shift. And so I would say that's kind of the biggest barrier. I will go back to your question around managers, because if I start to think about breaking down some of those barriers, managers really can make a huge difference in addressing how older workers feel and how valuable their experience, kind of shows up. And encouraging folks to learn and grow and having those career conversations are really essential. So I really hope to encourage managers to have those conversations about career, even if it's end of career type of conversations.
Yeah. So is that the main way to prevent? So seeing there's always two sides to everything, right? So if you are any type of worker asking for what you need, hey, this is an area I want to grow and develop. But then on the flip side, managers asking everyone, right? So one I heard was like erase the stereotype you have that an older worker doesn't need to grow and develop. That's the bias. But
Right.
then is it just having those formal conversations with them? Is there anything else that you suggest for them to do?
So one of my favorite examples is a manufacturing company that we worked for. And one of the things that they did that I thought was really great was they set up this reverse mentorship program. And so older employees were matched up with some of the younger employees. And so things like the digital tools from the younger coworkers, and then the younger coworkers were able to gain some really great and valuable insights around, customer leadership. And, customer service is one of those things like, the more you see, the better you become. And it's sort of an exercise of practice. And so it was really valuable for some of the older folks to share some of their experiences with the younger. And that reverse mentorship really helped. I'm going to teach you this, you're going to teach me that. And it created this beautiful result, which was confidence across the ages on both sides of the spectrum. And that's when you see barriers coming down.
Yeah, I love that. And is that just a static program that they have and they just keep it up on a regular basis?
They seem to. That's not a program that we run, but, we very closely work with program preparations on skilling. That was one that I recognized that they did.
Oh, I love it. Any other examples like that you have from, organizations doing something unique or different to help older workers or to overcome some of the generational differences that may happen for upskilling?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing is a mix of how corporations thinking about how can we address it. Should we address it through mentorship programs? Should we address it through education as a benefit? Should we address it through tuition reimbursement programs? Should we address it by building capability accelerators? That's a new thing that we're building, which is an academy of sorts where an organization can put a cohort into a specific group or academy that we can think then, what are the unique skills that are necessary for this organization to grow? That can be in this cohort modality. It may be hybrid in format. So you can have some live in person, you can have some online, and that sort of opens up something that is not just a self-directed online course. It really opens it up to a variety of different demographics as well. And so we've seen corporations do that, and that has worked in a really a great way as well.
Let me clarify. So for these capability accelerators, you would take a cohort from an organization. They would go through and the organization would say, yeah, we want people to work on, totally making this up, we'll bring AI into the conversation, and we need to make sure there's customer service, and we need to make sure there's emotional intelligence and project management. Like that, those are the skills, and then they would go through and then work on those skills.
Exactly. So imagine you might have a group of individuals that you want to teach in something very specific, and they would go through a program together that the corporation would curate with InStride to figure out what exactly is the right mix of learning, what's the right timing, how does it fit into the organizational objectives, and then work from there.
Gotcha. And as you're saying, I just want to put a fine point on the manager being the linchpin, because an organization can offer anything they want. You can have a whole host of benefits for people to take advantage of, but if the manager doesn't encourage it and role model it truly, right? Because there's enough research to show that, what your manager does will be role modeled. And if they're not one of growth and learning and development, then, it's not going to trickle down.
Yeah. And I mean, I think part of the manager being a part of your development is a really critical thing, whether that's one-on-one conversations with team members or whether that's seeing the senior boss taking courses or going back to school and really wanting to emulate that. And so it definitely matters what the managers are thinking and what they are encouraging.
Mm-hmm. So if there's a middle manager listening right now and they want to start being more intentional about developing their team, like what's one thing they could go into work tomorrow and do?
So think about your people and ask them, what's the one skill you always wanted to develop? I think that's super actionable. You can do it immediately. And you don't have to think about 10 things, but ask your people, what's the one skill? And if they can't think of it, give them time and then they'll come back to it. But be able to target specific questions. And when managers ask people questions, they not only show a sense of curiosity, but they start to think about, I care about you and I care about where you want to grow and what you want to learn. The other question that often comes in performance reviews, but at the same time in a positive way, if we turn it into a positive, you can ask something like, what's something you would like to get better at this year? And so by phrasing these kind of questions, it really puts ownership on the individual to take that next step, but it shows that level of curiosity from the middle manager. And you'd be surprised how often people really just light up when you ask them to share their goals, when you ask them to share something about themselves. It's truly an inspiring conversation.
Yeah, and I think that's also a tool a middle manager can use, answer those questions for themselves and bring that to their boss, right? Hey, I've been thinking, here's a skill I'd really like to work on this year. What are are there opportunities, or I see this opportunity? And then again, you're also taking care of yourself, because chances are your boss isn't going to ask you. I'm sorry, when you're a middle manager, unless you have a really good manager above you, they may not ask you.
Yeah, that's so they may not. And I think it's important to act on it and follow up. So, take ownership and certainly take the first step in initiative, and you can share that.
Mm-hmm. So, Michelle, where can people find out more about you and your company?
You can connect on LinkedIn with me. I'm active on LinkedIn. You can visit InStride.com for more information about InStride, for sure.
Okay, I'll link all of those up in the show notes. But Michelle, before we close out today, is there anything else that you want to leave the listeners with, or that I didn't ask you that you want to make sure you say?
I would add that the future of work, both in how we access learning and whose responsibility is it to develop the talent, to develop skills, to develop the next evolution of the worker. All of that is for setting up employment that can bring people to a place and to employment that they can be proud of. We spend 40 hours a week at work. So thinking about that sense of pride in what we do and how we work is something that we should all care for. And that continues to unfold as we rapidly advance in new ways to get work done. Certainly AI is an important part of that. And I'm really optimistic around, where that's going to go in the future. And I'd have to guess that organizations are rethinking the job holders, and we will be having a whole new conversation pretty soon. So thank you for having me. And this has been fun.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. It's been a pleasure.